and it's funny just to go back a little bit. People talk about we talk about our cop sense, our gut instinct. You feel like don't answer this call just then, or don't go into this house by yourself. Maybe don't stop this car. So we all have experiences, but a lot of times we just pass it off as ourselves, and many times it is. But yeah, the 2010 incident was a little bit different. I was actually the director of the police academy at the time. My oldest son, who was at the time turning 11, I think, wanted to go to St. Augustine because he'd seen one of those ghost hunter shows. And there was an incident in St. Augustine at the lighthouse. And I'm just about 3 hours south of St. Augustine. And they had an incident there that was on TV. It was the old ghost hunter show. And it showed a figure in the lighthouse. He wanted to go for his birthday. So I said, okay, fine. We went up there and we took this tour, say that's at the lighthouse, called the Dark of the Moon tour. And took the tour. He had a great time. He said, Dad, can we do it again? Well, we're not driving back to Vero, so why not? It was a 2-hour tour. So I bought tickets for a second tour. And the guide said, well, you guys just did this. And I've got a smaller group this time. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to take everybody else to the lightkeeper's house. You can have the lighthouse to yourself for about an hour, if that's okay. Groovy. That's exactly what we'll do. So Ryan and I are sitting on the 4th floor of this lighthouse. Typical lighthouse, huge, thick walls. You hear the wind howling, but you don't hear people outside because it's just too big. Well, suddenly we hear, without question, wasn't our imagination, we hear little kids laughing. Now, there's a story that back in 1879, the lighthouse was being reconstructed, rebuilt. And the construction foreman had a couple of daughters that were killed in an accident with the tram they used to bring the supplies up from the water. And they were using it as a roller coaster, went into the water, and they died. Since then, they had been reputed to be haunting that lighthouse. Well, back to the present time, Ryan and I hear these kids laughing. As a cop, what's the first thing I'm thinking? They're piping in those voices to enhance the experience, if you will. Let's have some fun with the guests. So I start looking for wires and speakers, trying to figure out how they pipe this kids laughing in there. There was nothing at all that could have done it. And I went all through that place. There was no wires. There were no speakers. There was nothing that explained what we heard. And we know what we heard. So it was at that point I'm thinking, and I'm combining what happened to me back in Dade County, back in those early years. And as a detective, you've got this thing about you're wanting to solve the crime. You're wanting to answer the question. What happens after we leave this existence? What's on the other side is one of the biggest questions, one of the biggest mysteries of all mankind. So at that point, I'm figuring I'm gonna find out what the answer to this is, and that's how we created. I'd done some investigations and had been looking into this for a few years prior, but it was at that point I said I'm going to try and use my skill set as a detective, put that to work to try and figure out what this phenomenon is, what this mystery is. So that's what I've been doing ever since.